The purpose of this video is to explain the interplay between two laws, Terefa and Eved Min HaChai. I'm not going to explain the full laws of Eved Min HaChai or the full laws of Terefa, but just for purposes of this discussion, Terefa refers to an animal that is alive, but that has some sort of internal injury, such as a punctured lung, whereby it will die within 12 months because of that internal injury. Eved Min HaChai is if somebody cuts a part, an organ of a living animal, to eat that organ. That's Eved Min HaChai. They do this in Machshemam in Asia, the To'evot HaGoyim, and other places. They still have this. Nevertheless, the purpose of this class, again, is not to explain the details of Eved Min HaChai or the details of Terefa, but rather to explain the interplay, because there's a relationship between, and the interplay is a little complex. So I'm just going to read some halachot. Hilchot ma'achalot asurot. Perek He, הלכה ט' המושיט ידו למעי הבהמה וחתך מן התחול ומן הכליות וכיוצא בהן והניח החתיכות בתוך מעיה ואחר כך שחטאה הרי אותן החתיכות אסורות משום אבן מן החי. This is an example of Eved Min HaChai, where the person cut internal organs of the animal while the animal was alive, and he left those internal organs inside the animals. For example, he cut a piece of the kidney off or a piece of the spleen off. That's Eved Min HaChai. So later on, when he makes shechita on the animal, even though the pieces were inside, he never took the pieces out, right? It's considered those pieces are considered Eved Min HaChai, assuming that the internal injury did not cause the animal to be in a state where it will die in 12 months. Then it would not be considered terefa, and the animal would be kosher. But those pieces would be considered Eved Min HaChai. Right? אבל אם חתך מן העובר שבמעיה ולא הוציאו והחתך שחטאה, הרי חתיכת העובר או איברו מותר הואיל ולא יסע. On the other hand, if the animal was pregnant and it had an embryo, and a person cut a piece of the embryo, didn't take it out of the animal, and then made shechita on the animal, those pieces are mutarim, right? And that's not considered Eved Min HaChai of the animal, because those Evarim were not of the animal. Those Evarim were of a separate entity, the Ubar. No commentary as to abortion, so please don't use this one way or the other. It's not at all the point. Okay, continuing. Ubar shehosi yado o raglo ne'esar oto ever le'olam. On the other hand, if an embryo, let's say, sometimes it happens when the animal is going into labor, that before it gives birth, an arm comes out or a leg comes out, right? That leg or arm that comes out before the animal gives, before the mother gives birth, בין שחתכו קודם שתשחט, בין שחתכו אחר שנשחטה אמו, ואפילו החזיר אותו האבל עם אמו, ואחר כך נשחטה, או נולד הבלד וחיה, כמה שנים הרי אותו האבל עשו משום טרפה. Interesting. That arm or leg that came out prematurely is considered terefa. Interesting. Why is it considered terefa? We said before that terefa refers to an animal that has an internal injury, let's say, where it will die within a year. Why is that piece of the embryo that came out considered terefa? The animal is not considered terefa. The mother is kosher, and the embryo is kosher. It's only that particular leg, let's say, that came out that's considered terefa. How come? שנאמר ובשר בשדה טרפה. הפסוק that says ובשר בשדה טרפה לא תאכל ולכלב תשכון אותו. And the derasha is not just an animal that was injured by another animal, and therefore it's terefa. I said internal injury. It doesn't have to be an internal injury, by the way, for terefa. It could also be an external injury, right? Where the animal will die in a year. כיוון שיעשה למקום שהוא לא כשדה ונעשה טרפה כמו שביארנו, in the case of this embryo, so the pasuk says ובשר בשדה טרפה. Meat found in the field. What does it mean, meat found in the field? So the derasha is that the field is not the place of the animal. The behema, in this case, the ubad belongs inside the womb. And the leg came out early. That's like the leg going into the sadeh. It's outside its regular context. And therefore, it becomes a terefa, right? So this arm not the entire embryo, only the arm or the leg that left the womb become a terefa. On the other hand, if, right, and we look at the part that's out and the part that's in, right? The part that's out is terefa, the part that's in is mutar. But let's now take a slightly different situation. Before, in the first halacha, the embryo let out a leg or an arm, right? And then eventually the mother gave birth, right? And then you made shechita on the mother, right? For example, right? So now, in that case, we said it's terefa. But if you cut the leg or the arm before you did shechita on the mom, in this case it's eved min achai. So again, if the ubar hosi yado raglo, right? And therefore, and then let's say the ubar returned, the embryo returned the leg, or the person, he wants to protect the mother. She can't give birth like that. Obviously, it has to be the head first. So he returns the leg or the arm, and then she gives birth naturally. So that leg and arm are asulim mishum basar basar de terefa. But let's say instead of returning the leg or the arm, maybe he couldn't do it. Maybe it was hard, right? It wasn't possible for some reason. Then he cuts it off. So if he cuts it off, in that case, it's eved min achai. That's interesting. So if it just leaves the embryo, but he doesn't cut it off, right? If it just leaves the embryo and he doesn't cut it off, but let's say he puts it back into the womb, that organ is going to be terefa. But if the organ left the womb and now he cuts it off, right? In that case, kodem shechita, and he cut it off before he did shechita on the mam. That's eved min achai. That's interesting. It's almost like now that it's outside, somehow it's connected with the mom and it becomes eved min achai. Strange. I don't know what the internal logic for that would be, right? Right? Because you cut it. Well, obviously because you cut it. I understand that point. But the thing is, what is it eved min achai? Is it eved min achai of the ubar or is it eved min achai of the mom? Right? Or is it one entity? That's where I'm a little puzzled. But the law is clear. The law is, if it returned the leg of the arm, it's terefa, it's not eved min achai. If you cut off the leg of the arm while it was outside, then it's eved min achai. Right? Ubar shehosi ever, v'ne'esar ha'ever. V'chakach nolad, v'harehi nekeva, v'chalav shela asul lishtoto misafek. Okay, that's all that I wanted to study in this particular context.